the cloud. Okay, welcome everyone. I have a guest here today with me. He's agreed to speak with me on the condition of, some level of anonymity, and so we'll just call him guest for today. And also, that's why he's not showing his video. So this is a friend that I met in college, and we kind of worked alongside each other on some things, especially through some classes. And I really enjoyed his company. And it wasn't until much later that I found out that he had, there were some personal struggles related to mental health. And we've been keeping in touch. He's in, I'll just say he's physically very far, but we've managed to keep in touch a little bit. And I've personally enjoyed seeing him thrive. And I just wanted to have him on to just ask about his experiences and to help him spread some awareness of his coping strategies and his story. So thank you, Guess, for coming on. It's very nice to have you.
You're welcome.
How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you for letting me have the opportunity to share my story, and hopefully someone will find it useful, some of the strategies.
Yeah, that's the hope. And right now the channel is pretty small. We just had a new subscriber like yesterday, so I'm up to 6 subscribers, but it's 6 people that are actually really interested in listening. So that's amazing, and hopefully we can help them. So let's just start with kind of the general background, just tell me about where you're from and how, what your childhood was like.
Okay, so originally I'm from California, but in 6th grade I was diagnosed with ADHD and major depressive disorder, and I was prescribed Ritalin, an antidepressant, and eventually a sleeping pill to go along with the Ritalin, because when you take the Ritalin, sometimes you have trouble falling asleep at night, and so I was given one of those sleeping pills to kind of help me fall asleep. And generally, I would say that I was still this moody teenager when I was in high school. But eventually, what happened when I went away to college was I ended up getting, I would say, addicted to the stimulant medication. And I think there's a few contributing factors to that. But I was definitely, I think, addiction, not a dependence. Because in high school, I would say if I didn't take medication, I wouldn't really care. I wouldn't focus very well. But if college, when I didn't take the medication, I was craving it. I would if I forgot it somewhere, wherever I would stop what I was doing, go home just to take the medication. I would take it when I didn't have work to do, just to kind of feel that natural high. And so somewhere in the middle of college, I decided to quit using the stimulant. And that was
so wait, let me interrupt. Right, so this is okay. So we're getting a little ahead. So I want to understand. So you were diagnosed in 6th grade, you said. So it was pretty early on. And so I'm curious if there were any actual causes for the depression, or if it seemed to be just a thing that your brain.
To be honest, I would say my childhood was pretty great. From an objective standpoint, my parents loved me and we had a great household. No one in school bullied me. I was always really, really shy, but my close friends were very close. I had at least 3 or 4 very good friends. So from the outside, there was no real reason that I should be depressed. I had trouble reading a little bit. I would say it was hard for me to focus on reading. And I would have these mood swings where I would be sad for a few weeks, and then I would be okay for a few weeks, and then sad for a few weeks. And I guess later when we get to that part of the story, they'll realize that major depressive disorder was not actually major depressive disorder. It was bipolar type 2, which is bipolar without full-blown mania.
Interesting. So
I would say that chemical. There's no real, at least for me, there's no real reason that I should have been as depressed as I was.
Yeah, that's really interesting, and I think that's a pretty common thing too. Like, yeah, and certainly in my life, there's been plenty of times when things are great on paper, and for some reason, things are just not, you know, not clicking.
Yeah.
So sixth grade. So, and then how long did you experience these symptoms? Like, ADHD. You can talk about both. So ADHD and these depressive episodes. When did it start? And when did it start becoming a problem? Like, how did it negatively affect your life?
So I think it's hard to like kind of remember when it started because I don't remember a start. It's just always been the way that it's been. So I would say I started noticing at least the ADHD symptoms when reading got to be actually difficult. I would say that would probably been starting around 4th to 5th grade, but I didn't know like that it was hard for that reason. I just assumed I sucked at it. So I didn't really say anything until like one day in 6th grade. Like I just lost it and had a tantrum to my parents about like how hard reading is, how much I hate it, and how much it sucks. And that's when my parents realized, well, maybe he has some kind of focus problem. And so they brought me to a psychiatrist who ran like a battery of tests and said, yeah, you have both major depressive disorder and ADHD. That's kind of where it all started, I would say.
And did the medication start helping?
Yeah, I would say the time that I like really found my footing in school was precisely when I started taking that medication. That's when I started to get like I was always like good at like symbolic like algebra and math, but I became like much better, I would say, at focusing on the problems. And so I became much better at like the science math part of my education. Like that's when that really opened up for me as an option. And I would also say that even though my reading improved, like I could be in like the honors level English classes, the honors level history classes, but I wasn't say like the best at those because I think I still had like kind of a weakness on that part, like just naturally. But it definitely made performance at school much easier than it was before. Like it really improved my ability to read and focus on pretty much every level, I would say.
And is there a way you've managed to like is there a way you can describe what ADHD was like for you, like what it was like being in school before and after the medication?
Unfortunately, that's like stretching back to the edge of my memory. I remember that. How do I put this? I remember that like when I was little, it was hard to read. Was the main thing that was difficult. I would spell really badly. I would make careless mistakes constantly. I was really bad at those like time tests where you had to do as much multiplication as quickly as we could. Careless mistakes were littered throughout my work. I would just say that were like the major problems that I was facing. And I was kind of relying on my intelligence to get me through elementary. Like I would still get like in the B range, but like my teachers were always thinking, why isn't he getting the A's? He's clearly knows what's going on, but he make all of these mistakes that could have been prevented. And then when I went to middle school with on the medication, a lot of those mistakes, I guess, dropped away. There's less careless mistakes, especially when it came to math and science. I was much better at doing more accurate work. I wouldn't say it was perfect. I still made careless mistakes, but was much, much better. I could read, so my reading skill vastly improved so that I could do much better in English class. I wasn't, say, good, because I was never like a good speller, and I'm still not really a good speller. But besides for that, I was better at English than I was back in elementary. By no means.
Oops, wait, okay, yeah, so your audio's back. All right, yeah, so you cut out for a moment. Um, cool, yeah, okay. And was this like, one last question before we move on, was this kind of, did you feel like this impatience and you didn't have the patience to just go back and check the work? Or was it just, purely just careless, like you didn't even think to double check things and just wanted to keep going forward?
I would say primarily it was both. So as like a kid, you want to finish your homework, get it done, and go play. So that was part of it. The second part, I think, is that that I wouldn't notice that there was a problem, if that makes sense. And when I was doing it, I would just assume that I did it right, and I just wouldn't notice that I did something wrong.
Mhm. So, okay, right. So then, right. So you get on medication and it helps significantly. It sounds like it's significantly helped. And then you come to college and um, you, you had I guess you had like a stockpile of Ritalin. And so, you know, I guess I'm just curious, like, were you saving the Ritalin for a reason or was it just,
I can explain that. So, during the so I guess to step back a second. During the medication regime that I had when I was in high school, you had this. You take this time release tablet in the morning that should hold you all the way through school. By the time school ended, you would no longer need your Ritalin would run out essentially. You would need another kind of boost to get you through the time from like 3 p.m. to the end of the night. And so they gave this quick acting Ritalin that you could take for homework. If you didn't how do you say it? If you didn't have any homework or you didn't need it or it was the summer, you could not take it. And so over the course of 6 years, I just had this huge leftover stockpile because the doctor would just sign a little sheet and just give it to you. He wouldn't track if you used it or not, and he just write a prescription every month for the full regime as if you needed it every day. And so and then on top of that, one thing is the tolerance over high school. I mean, it did occasionally need to be increased because when you're taking a medication for that long, tolerance will increase. So you also have this more and more pills per as time goes on. And so when I went to college, I just figured I'll just bring it all. Why not? If I'm stupid and forget to go to the doctor for some reason, I'll have some, and I don't have to worry too much about uh, making sure that I regularly go to the doctor. That was at least the headspace I was as a naive freshman. But I kind of I guess realize that when I have a lot of homework to do and I need to stay up really, really late, it kind of helps. And then I kind of stopped taking that sleeping pill. And then, so I'd stay up really late, your sleep would start to deregulate. So then you need more Ritalin to focus when you're sleep deprived. And then from that, you start getting into those dosage regimes where getting addicted becomes very likely. And I think that's what happened.
So can you describe that process? I mean, because I imagine you had a good sense of how much medication you needed just to function, but it sounds like, yeah. So I mean, was it such a gradual thing that you didn't even realize that you were going down the path of addiction?
I would say yes. Like freshman year, I think you could like make the argument that I was addicted by the end of it, but I didn't really realize it yet. It wasn't until like the beginning of sophomore year that I kind of like realized it and then started hiding it from people. So I would say that the getting into that danger zone was definitely like a frog boiling in water. I didn't realize it until it was way too late.
Um, and I just want to understand the process a little more. So you had mentioned like, right, so you'd stop taking the sleeping pills, and so you don't sleep as well, and so you need more of the medication to function. And was that the primary driver, or did you also have, did you want to also perform well academically? Were there
I
other motivations for that?
that is definitely part of the motivation. Like, you have all this homework to do, you want to do really, really good on it, and there's like this, you feel like you're smarter on it. And so the combination of that, like, academic pressure to be the best, I think really motivated me to take more than I should, at least near the like later stages of it. And definitely in sophomore year, that was the main reason that I was taking it. And in my mind, like, if I stopped taking it, I would become, I guess, in my mind, I had constructed a story that if I stopped taking it, I would fail out of the university, and I would become like I guess, an idiot in some sense. And when I quit, I actually made the decision that I would rather quit the using all those stimulants and be like, I guess, happy, rather than perform. Like, I gave up in my mind the university in order to quit. Luckily, it turned out I didn't need to do that. But in my mind, I had constructed this narrative where that was a necessary thing to my academic success, I would say.
Mm-hmm. And when did you realize that this actually became an addiction, and how?
The beginning of sophomore year, and the reason I realized it was because of my behavior around the medication had changed. I started making sure that I always had it with me in my backpack, which is something that I never did. I was taking it maybe once every 2 hours. In the middle of sophomore year, I was starting to kind of crush the tablets so that I could get rid of the time release coating on the top of it. Near the end of sophomore year, I had also started to get other sort of drugs, such as this might sound really weird, but there's an antidepressant called Wellbutrin that also has a little bit of a stimulant effect that I would try to take as well in very, very large doses, because I had a big stockpile of that as well. And if you take enough of that, you can get a little bit of a high. So like, those kind of behaviors were that about sophomore year, I started to notice that. And like, that to me was saying I was addicted rather than dependent, because that's not the behavior of someone that's using the medication responsibly.
Yeah, and right. So then, and at this point, you're full on addicted, and you realize it. And then you mentioned you actually hid it from people. So yeah, why did you choose to hide it as opposed to seek help at that time?
I guess I should be more specific when I say hide. So people like knew that I was on this medication for ADHD and depression, but I didn't let them know that I was addicted to it, because I was afraid that if people knew the extent of which I was abusing it, then that I could end up, what is the word? They would want me to say maybe get help or something and to stop taking it. And that to me couldn't happen, because if that happened, then what's the word? Then I would not be able to succeed at school. And the most important thing was making sure that I had access to the drug, if that makes sense. And so I didn't mind people knowing that I had ADHD and I had medication, but I didn't want people knowing the extent of which it was the problem. I think there's also a little bit of an ego thing, is because I thought maybe if people knew that I was abusing it, maybe they think that I wasn't actually smart, I would say. Maybe that was, I think, if I'm being honest, was also part of the reason that I hid the extent of the abuse. And then I guess, sorry. I guess this is another, I guess, a way of reason is it's important to note that during this time that the addiction was not very, I guess, nice to the people around me. It was really, really, really hard on a lot of my friends. And I think a lot of my friends made the right choice to kind of distance themselves from me. And so I think that is a major, I guess, reason that I also hit it. And it's also the major reason that I ended up quitting in the end, because I was losing lots of friends very rapidly at the end. And I think a lot of that was because I'm not sure if it's the medication was inducing bipolar or the bipolarness of my true self was starting to come out, because bipolar as a child is not very prevalent, but then kind of starts to manifest itself in early adulthood. But also one of the symptoms of Adderall abuse is bipolar. So it's kind of hard to tell, like, is the bipolar because I was abusing the medication, or is the bipolar always there? And that kind of was another underlying fuel. To say all of that, people around me did not appreciate it. And I think that's a major factor of why I ended up quitting and why I hit it in the first place.
And I just wanted to note that, well, so first it was that your fear with regards to other people, you know, that like trying to maintain the access to the medication is very consistent with the story that you had built up for yourself, that you really need the medication. And then, you know, to anyone listening who maybe has a similar fear about, you know, maybe I'm not as smart on medication, it's been shown pretty definitively that medication, this type of stimulant medication, doesn't make you smarter. Right. So to anyone watching, I never thought of my friend as any smarter or dumber than he is before or after the medication. Right. He's always been just as, it's always obvious. Like, you know, when you interact with someone, you can kind of get a sense of how smart they are, or how good they are at a particular thing. And I always thought of my friend as just, you know, just honestly very talented. And just by the way that he does research, I can see that that type of intellect is still there. It's like the medication never took anything away from him.
Yeah. And I'd like to kind of emphasize that point. Now that I've been, I guess, sober for, I think it's 8 years now, it took a while initially to get back on my feet. But once I did, all my intelligence, I would say, came back. It's just a little bit harder to focus now than it was back then. So I think that, at least from my point of view, it definitely did not make me smarter. It made me feel like I was smarter, but I definitely was not smarter. I'm still the same intelligence that I was in the end. And I think if I could go back and tell myself anything, it's that you don't need this medication to be smart.
That's really good. Thank you for sharing that part. And so I want to also understand. All right. Okay. So yeah, you recognize you're addicted, and you don't want to sacrifice that connection to that supply. And then you mentioned that your friendships really suffered. So what was that like?
Painful. I think painful for everyone involved. I think a big part of bipolar is this paranoia that people are not doing things for your best interest. So if something negative happens or something ambiguous happens, you're always going to see it in the most negative light. And that kind of symptom is magnified under Adderall, because it's a stimulant, and stimulants make you, I guess, more manic, therefore more paranoid. And so I would always, like, if someone said something that I didn't understand what they kind of meant, I would take the most negative interpretation. If people didn't want to hang out one day, I thought that they hated my guts and didn't want to be my friend. And I get this really obsessive over every little thing that they would do, and paint this huge negative story about how they didn't like me and how they hated me and how they were, like, out to kind of just ruin me, which was completely fabricated, like had no basis in reality. But when you have someone that's constantly doing that around you, eventually you might be, okay, they have some mental disorder. It's okay. I forgive you the first time. Okay, I forgive you the second time. But like after the third time, they're not gonna want to be around that. And I think justifiably, lots of friends just started to say, I can't handle this. I'm leaving. And the first time that they kind of started like saying that, like I got really angry and upset. And eventually I kind of realized that I can't live like that. And so that was the main impetus for me quitting, is I guess losing so many friends in college, I would say. And yeah, without going into too many personal details on that front, I think, yeah.
I see. Yeah, that sounds like an awful process. And so yeah, clearly a very strong driver for you to get, get help for your addiction. So this is about the time that we lost contact, because I saw you a few times.
Yeah, because that's the time I took a year off to get clean, and then I think you graduated, if I recall correctly.
I see.
Because I took an entire year essentially off of school to kind of just take care of my body. And I guess something to keep in mind is when you quit stimulants, you're not going to be able to think. Like focus after quitting was quite horrible. So it takes a while to recover.
Yeah. So, and I also want to take a moment. So to take a step back for just a moment, I'm really glad you brought up the fact that you were becoming paranoid. And so it's not clear yet to me if the paranoia was because of the large doses you were taking, or if it was actually always there as part of the side effect for you. I think it was really important for you to say that, because in my case, I've had the opposite thing, where off medication, I like the way you described being paranoid about people not liking me and like getting angry because of it. That happened a lot. And then with the medication, I can actually put those thoughts aside and move on. So, in my case, I've been saying stimulants are like amazing and they do these great things, but actually, no, it's not necessarily. Like individual people will react differently. And so, who knows the proportion of people that will react positively versus negatively. Generally, it seems to be positive based on studies. But yeah, I think it's very important. I just wanted to put that out because it's not.
It's actually very interesting that you say that, because in high school, when I was taking the dosages as I was supposed to, I had no paranoia. When I came back to my high school friends, when I was taking the year off, they're all like, "What? That is not how you act. You've never been paranoid." So, and then nowadays, like, I still suffer from that paranoia. If I'm not taking my bipolar medication regularly, which does happen, I do very rapidly decay into this kind of paranoia state. So I think that's the main reason that they diagnosed me with bipolar, is because after getting off all of those stimulants, that paranoia it's still there. And that kind of mood swinginess, it's still there. And it wasn't there in high school, really, especially the paranoia. It was really in college that it started, and it was really exacerbated by the stimulant medication, I would say. So it's interesting, I would say. Yeah. So it makes sense that it helps you a lot, because in high school, I was never really like that.
I see. Okay. And so now, and also the bipolar part, I mean, how big of a, it's not quite clear where bipolar came into your life. So it was, you had major depressive disorder, just taking a quick detour here. And then when did you learn that it was bipolar disorder?
I think that is when the addiction started, when I kind of admitted it to my psychiatrist. That's when they diagnosed me with the bipolar, especially with the kind of rapidly swinging mood. And it maintained itself after removing myself from the addiction. So I would be depressed for 3 weeks, and then I would be fine for 3 weeks, and then I would be depressed again for 3 weeks. And when I was in high school, you don't really notice this, but I'd be really, really moody and sad for like 3 weeks. And then I would be fine for a few weeks. And I'd be really moody and sad for 3 weeks. And from like a teenage perspective, it's just, well, maybe he's just depressed all the time and he's just having a good week. But really what that was is I'm going down and then up. And I guess there's another thing to kind of keep in mind is there's this thing called, there's bipolar 1, which is like that full-blown manic kind of like, if you imagine you take a bunch of stimulants, that kind of almost high delusional state. And then there's this state called hypomania, which is kind of like that perfect region where you have a lot of energy, you can do a lot of work, but you're not delusional. And I was diagnosed with bipolar type 2. Because the only time that I really had those full-blown manic states were when I was using or when I was misusing the stimulant medication. But once I got clean, I never really had those manic episodes. But I would definitely have months where I didn't need to sleep as much. I was really productive, really focused. Everything was very easy. And it would be followed by like a crippling sadness where I felt useless. I couldn't focus. Everything about myself sucked, and those kind of patterns will repeat month to month, even 8 years removed from the stimulant medication, I would say.
Yeah, and like you said, in your case, it wasn't clear if the stimulants, the addiction brought it out, or if it was always like part of you.
It's kind of hard to know, like, does the medication change how your brain works? I think that's an unanswerable question.
Yeah.
What I do know is the bipolar medication quiets the negative effects of the manic episodes. So I'm not as paranoid. I can sleep more regularly. I don't get angry as easily. And when I don't take it, it gets worse.
Yeah. Okay, so now you're right. So now you're taking a break, or sorry, you're taking this year off from school. So did you seek professional help in addition to taking a year off from school? Like, and yet and what were the struggles that you experienced through that year?
So I would say the year off of school. So let me put it this way. So I was always getting professional help because my source of Ritalin was my doctor, essentially. So it was just me admitting to my doctor that I had a problem. But also, as I said, I was not very nice to my friends. So the school actually got involved on a disciplinary level because I was being, I guess, to put it lightly, an asshole. So they forced me into Alcohol Anonymous in order to stay at the university. Alcohol Anonymous wasn't, I'm to say, that necessarily the best fit for me because I never abused alcohol. But I guess I would say it did help a little bit because it gave me techniques to handle some of the cravings that I was feeling for the medication. And I learned a lot about how to like control my emotions from that. Even though I didn't really fit in with everyone there because they had like abusing alcohol and abusing stimulant medication is like, I guess it's a little bit different. Anyway, so I was forced into that. So I had to go to that a lot whenever I was at Case. So I had to be in it for, I think, 3 years. Then also after taking the break for a year, and then when I came back to Case, I had to be kind of like part-time. I could only handle like 2 classes at a time. And even then that was quite a struggle. And I would say that it took a while to get through university because it took like 3 years to really recover my ability to focus. And it was not until like after I graduated and moved to my research assistant job that I was really able to kind of get my focus back to something where I could do high level research again. So it was kind of like a slow process of really learning techniques that can control my mood and control the cravings and like really make sure that I'm being a good person, if that makes sense.
So yeah, it does. So what are the specific things, or some examples of things you learned where you can learn to control your cravings or mood?
The first 2 is for mood. For cravings, let's just start with cravings. Cravings is just kind of, you just have to buckle down and suffer for like 10 minutes and then it'll pass and it'll be gone. And the more you do that, eventually it'll kind of decay. Now I rarely get cravings this far removed. But for mood, these techniques I think are fairly useful. The first one is realizing that it's all in your head and just kind of saying, okay, what I'm feeling right now will go away in a day. Just ignore it. Don't do any actions. Don't text anyone. Don't act on this, basically. Just wait for it to pass. The second thing is sleep. Sleep is really, really important. If you don't sleep regularly, it's going to get worse. And another thing that I found, this helps me with both anxiety and the paranoia, is eating 3 meals a day. If I don't eat, I'm more anxious and I'm easier and quicker to get to anger. So when I eat, it's so much better, I guess. So even if I'm just eating something small, if I eat, I'm able to perform better, I guess. It's just making sure my body's fueled. And those, I would say, are like the 3 biggest techniques that I have found that help.
And actually, that I'm really happy you said. Well, yeah, of course. Thank you for sharing, and I just want to mention that actually a lot of those things are almost exactly the type of things that I have to follow. It's almost as if like we need to. It's like in my case, it's like I need to keep my brain fueled as consistently as possible, which also includes like good sleep, and then it can like operate as well as it can given the circumstances. It sounds like you've had a similar benefit from doing those things. That's amazing. Um, so let's see. So you took a full year off and then you returned to school part-time, right?
Yeah.
And that was just because you weren't quite able to function the way you could before.
Yeah. It took about 3 years to get my brain back. It was a long process.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's crazy. So, I mean, did alcoholics? So that's such a long time. I'm just curious. Like, I mean, was it that Alcoholics Anonymous helped give you a support system to push you through that, or was it family? Like, how were you able to consistently stay off and like avoid those cravings for that long?
So I think it was 2 factors. I think one, the way that I got my medication was always legally through the doctor, and I quit pretty much right before I needed to start getting illegal sources, I would say. So just the way that I quit and cut off all potential ways to get the medication, I had like no context that could get it me extra legally, I guess. So that helped a lot. That made it, I wouldn't say easy, but it made it harder to fail, if that makes sense. And then again, the support network from AA and the support network from my parents. My parents were like really great through the whole process. So like that I felt was, and I guess the few friends that didn't leave me, all of them were, I guess, were very, very necessary for me making it through.
I see. Yeah, and it seems like with these, whether it's like depression or mental health or addiction, it seems like in general having a strong support system is like one of the key things to helping someone get out of that. Yeah. So yeah, and I don't know much about addiction actually, so this is actually really helpful for me to learn about. And so what were the doses you were taking? Yeah, like what was the standard dose that you were given, and then how much were you taking on top of that?
Let me see if I can try to remember. It's been so long that the dosages numbers are starting to leave my mind. But I think at the end of high school for Ritalin, the extended release tablet was 60 milligrams, and the afternoon booster pill was 20 milligrams, I believe, at the end of high school. I may be wrong. It might have been 10 milligrams. I can't quite remember. So that would have been approximately 80 milligrams a day. near the end of the addiction cycle, I was easily taking 200 to 300 milligrams of Ritalin. I was stripping off that extended release tablet. I was taking, I've completely forgotten the dosage of the Wellbutrin, but normally you take one pill, and I was taking 4, I think. And then I was also on top of that taking caffeine pills, which each one is equivalent to 2 cups of coffee. And I would take 5 to 10 depending on the day. So like if I wasn't doing anything important, I would only take maybe 2 or 3 to keep the caffeine headache away. If I was doing a lot of stuff, I would have like 8 to 10 of them. So that would be like the normal day near the end of the drugs that I was taking. So a lot, way more than you should be.
Yeah, certainly. And so, can you tell us a bit about what your life is like now? So it's been, you said, about like eight years, I guess, since you really stopped, and then it took 3 years to recover. And then how? Sorry?
Yeah, my life is pretty. I wouldn't say it's much better. Let me put it that way. Of course, I still struggle with the depression side of everything. But as far as like the manic part, I have very little problems with that. Like occasionally I'll think someone's like being like mean to me, but I won't really act on it. And if I do act on it, it's in a way that the people around me can kind of understand. I rarely get angry. And if I do get angry, it's nothing like it was before. It's kind of like a normal anger response. Like, nothing that people are going to be like, oh, he's way too angry, I should stay away from him. It's just kind of like, I guess in some sense, I'm just like a normal person when it comes to anger and paranoia. For the depression, I think is the thing I kind of still deal with. A lot of it is like imposter syndrome, feeling that I'm not good enough to be in academia, and that my work is not good, and that it's kind of like those standard depression feelings. And it's kind of like there's always those thoughts that you're not good enough. But to me, what makes depression like crippling is when that feeling of you sucking keeps you in bed and you don't want to get up and go to work. But for me, I can still get up, go to work, even though I feel like shit. I'm still capable of doing the research that I need to do, and being at the meetings that I need to be, and going to the classes that I need to go to. So on that level, I would say I still internally suffer from the depression, but I found how to deal with those feelings and still perform what I need to get done. And I'm on the manic side, just to kind of recap, I don't, even though I might be internally upset, I don't act on it, and people around me rarely notice that I am angry or upset or those kind of things.
Mm-hmm. And that's, it makes me very happy that, like when you said you can act like a normal person, I think a lot of people watching this would resonate with that, like, some of us, certainly me, I've struggled so long with trying to be normal, right? Why can't my emotions just be normal? And it just takes a lot of work to figure it out. And in my case, certainly medication's required. And I wish I could, help you get rid of that imposter syndrome. I don't make it a secret how highly I think of you. And, I wish people watching this channel knew that, they're just exactly how smart you are. It's insane. So
Thank you.
Yeah,
I
for what it's
think
worth,
imposter syndrome is something that we all, everyone in academia suffers from it. It's really fun, but I don't think it's just something weird about it. Like a lot of the people in my lab, the smartest people in my lab also suffer from imposter syndrome. And I wouldn't say they're like depressed or they're like normal people, and they still suffer from severe imposter syndrome. So it's just kind of, I think that's just the name of the game in academia. We all feel like we shouldn't belong, and we all belong.
Yeah. Yeah, it's almost like anyone who can handle that imposter syndrome that basically belongs.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I think the final question I have for you is, how, like, what's the advice you would give if someone feels like they might be going down a path of addiction, or if they are in a path of addiction and scared of changing and doing something about it? What's the advice that you would give them?
So I guess there's two pieces of advice. Follow the doctor's instruction at all times. Do not deviate from it. Do not think that you're smarter than the doctor. Do not think that it won't happen to you. Just follow the doctor's instruction. And I would say if you are going down that road, tell your psychiatrist that's giving you the medication. I found that aside from the behavioral issues, there were no legal consequences. Everyone was very, very supportive, and no one really judged me for it at all. Everyone I've met so far has been very supportive. No one has said, "Oh, you're less of a person because you admitted this." In fact, it's the opposite. Most people are like, "Wow, it's so impressive you've overcome addiction." So I would say, don't be ashamed. Tell your psychiatrist and follow their instructions.
Excellent. Thank you so much I know how busy you are, so that's all the questions I have for you. Is there anything else that you wanted to say or have questions, or just wanted to discuss?
No, thank you for inviting me on. It's always important to share. One of the main things in AA that they told you is sharing reminds you of your past, and that kind of, by paying it forward, you're helping others, but you're also helping yourself. So I think more of us should be sharing our stories. And the more we share, more we can help others, but it's also, I think, a big thing to kind of help ourselves as well. So thank you for giving me the opportunity.
You're very welcome. Thank you again for coming on. Take care, everyone. I hope you enjoyed this, and I'll see you next time.